Welcome back to the Deep Dive. Today we were looking at a case from Bara City in Vietnam that is just. It's incredibly complex. It's a criminal trial that really pushes on the limits of law and, what justice even means when a family is completely shattered by abuse.
It's a really difficult one. The source material is tragic. You have a young student, Tong Thi Tung Lin, who in 2022 was convicted of murdering her own father.
And the initial facts are just so stark.
They are. We're talking about premeditated murder, illegal trading of toxic substances, and arson on top of it all.
So our mission today isn't just to go over the sensational parts of the crime. We really want to understand the extraordinary human dynamics that came out during the trial.
Exactly.
Specifically, we're diving into how this history of chronic trauma, and this is the most surprising part, the plea for forgiveness from the victim's own family, how that fundamentally changed everything.
It's so important to get the context right from the start. Lin was facing the most severe penalty possible.
The death penalty.
Yeah. The death penalty. But she ultimately received a combined sentence of life imprisonment, which is known as Chungben. And that difference, that gap between the maximum and the final sentence, that's where the real story is.
It's where the legal system had to wrestle with some deep emotional and psychological context.
It really challenges our whole idea of who is a perpetrator and who is a victim.
Right. Okay, let's unpack this. Let's start with the immediate facts of the case.
The sources are very clear that the crime was both premeditated and brutal. Lin used cyanide to poison her father, a Mr. T.H.
And then, to cover it up, she set the house on fire.
Yes, which led to that separate charge of destruction of property. It was a calculated act.
So the conviction came down on December 15, 2022. The headline was life imprisonment, but it was actually 3 separate convictions, wasn't it? Can you walk us through the breakdown?
Certainly. The main one, the one that anchors the whole sentence, was for murder, that carries the life sentence. Then, on top of that, she got 3 years for the illegal trade of toxic substances, Morban Tri, Phepchet Duck.
For buying the cyanide.
Correct. And then another 3 years for the arson, the destruction of property charge, which is Hus Hi Tai San.
So those 6 years for the other crimes were basically absorbed into the life sentence for the murder.
That's right.
And it's worth pointing out, she didn't get that poison entirely on her own. There was another person involved.
Yes, a co-defendant named Tran Thanak too. She was sentenced to 2 years, but specifically for her role in the illegal trade part. The court was very clear in separating her actions from the murder and the arson itself.
So once you have the facts straight, the what and the how, the conversation has to turn to the why. And this is where the court spent a huge amount of its time.
A massive amount. The source material really builds this picture of long-term abuse, which the court panel later said was a crucial mitigating factor.
And the father, the victim, Mr. T.H.A., he was described in a very particular way, wasn't he?
He was. The family said he was talented, diligent, smart. He was a driver and then started his own ice production business. A hard worker.
It's that classic, almost terrifying duality, isn't it? The respected man in public versus the tyrant behind closed doors.
Yes. That private world was defined by something the sources call tijiatring.
Which is the poo. What exactly?
It's a kind of rigid, intensely patriarchal dominance. His word was law in the house, absolute control, total deference required. But it was more than just being strict. It was relentless abuse.
And the person who laid all of this bare in court was Lin's own mother, Ba N.T. She was there as the victim's representative, which is already an impossible position to be in.
And her testimony was just heartbreaking. She talked about this constant pattern of her husband scolding, cursing, using this vulgar language. The source calls it lo tuk tu let ko meheng.
Just awful language.
Awful. Directed at her and at the children.
And it wasn't just verbal, right? It escalated.
It did. The mother testified that he would sometimes beat her. But what's really telling is how she responded to it all.
She just endured it.
In total silence. For the sake of the family.
That idea of silent endurance, I mean, it just speaks volumes about the pressure to maintain the family image, no matter what.
She never told anyone, not even her own mother-in-law, the victim's mother. She said it was out of shame or maybe pride. She didn't want people to know the bad things happening in her own home.
Oh, wow.
It's an internalized prison of shame. She said sometimes she'd just take the kids to the parks to physically escape his verbal attacks. Just for a moment of peace.
So that constant systemic emotional violence.
Yeah.
That's the soil this whole tragedy grew out of.
It's the absolute foundation for what happened to Lin psychologically.
And the final tragic irony is that when it all happened, the mother, Ball, She wasn't even there.
No, she was in Saigon. She was caring for Lynn's older sister who'd just had a baby.
The cognitive dissonance must have been overwhelming. First, you hear there's a fire at your house. Then you hear your daughter has been arrested for murder.
She physically collapsed from the shock when she heard the news.
And then, on top of all that grief and shock, she had to face suspicion from other people.
Yes. People were criticizing her, even suggesting that maybe, after all those years, she had somehow pushed her daughter to do it.
An awful, awful accusation. What did she say to that?
She just broke down in court, denying it completely, crying that she would only ever suffer in silence, as she put it. She would never, ever encourage something so violent.
And that denial is so important because it frames her as just another victim in this, not some kind of co-conspirator.
Exactly. It just deepens the sense of profound loss for the whole family.
Okay, so that long-term trauma is the weight that the court has to somehow measure. But then the story shifts inside the courtroom itself.
Yeah.
And this next part is maybe the most extraordinary piece of all. The plea for mercy.
According to the sources, the emotional atmosphere in that courtroom was just almost unbearable. Bah! The mother. She was crying so hard during her testimony that they had to keep stopping.
And in a murder trial, there's always the issue of compensation.
Yeah.
What happened when they asked her if she wanted any kind of financial restitution from Lynn?
She waived it completely, said she didn't want any money. Her entire request to the court panel, the HFX, was purely humanitarian.
What did she ask for?
She begged them. The word used is kukan, like a desperate plea for a reduced sentence. She told the court, "I've already lost everything. My husband is dead, my house is gone, and now my daughter is facing the death penalty." All she wanted was for Lynn to have a chance to live.
That is just an incredible sacrifice. She's demanding zero justice for the victim, her husband, in order to save the perpetrator, her child.
And Lynn's older sister backed her up completely. She confirmed the whole history, the drinking, the verbal abuse, the beatings, and she also begged the court for leniency.
But this is where the story takes a turn that you almost never see.
Never. Because the forgiveness wasn't just from the mother and sister. The victim's own relatives.
His side of the family.
His side. His father, his uncles, his other relatives. They were in court weeping, and they all joined the plea for mercy for Lynn.
Wait, the victim's own father and uncles pleaded for clemency for the person who murdered their son and nephew.
Yes.
I mean, how does a court even process that? From a purely legal standpoint, doesn't that risk undermining the entire idea of punitive justice for premeditated murder?
That's the knife's edge the court was on. But I think the family's unified stance shows that they saw this as not just a crime against one person, but as the final horrible collapse of a family system that had been broken for a very long time.
So it wasn't about one man's death anymore.
It was about preventing more tragedy. They explicitly said that despite their pain, they didn't want the family to suffer another blow. Keeping Lynn alive was, for them, a way to stop the bleeding.
A communal choice to pick healing over retribution.
Wow.
And that leads to this one moment the sources highlight, right before deliberations.
The final embrace, yes. Just before the HXX left the room, the three women, the mother, the sister, and Lynn, they all just ran to each other in the middle of the court and collapsed into this embrace, weeping hysterically.
It's just an image of complete devastation.
It is. It shows they're mourning the dead and the condemned at the same time, refusing to let the law completely sever the bonds between them.
So, given all of that, the raw emotion, the family's plea, but also the brutal facts, the poison, the arson, how did the court actually justify avoiding the death penalty?
Their reasoning was very specific, and it went directly to the issue of abuse. The Hayeks explicitly stated that the father's continuous long-term abuse.
The drinking, the violence.
All of it. They said it had caused Lynn significant spiritual trauma. The term they used was tuntun.
Spiritual trauma, tuntun. How significant is a term like that in a legal ruling? We're not talking about a sudden provocation here. This is a slow burn over many years.
It's hugely significant. It shows the court was willing to look past the final act and analyze the root cause. They concluded that this long-term injury drove Lynn to destructive negative thinking that, directly led to the crime.
So they're basically saying the victim's own conduct was a direct catalyst.
A direct catalyst that caused such severe psychological damage, it eroded her judgment. That's a massive statement from a court.
It reframes the whole idea of premeditation. So what were the other official mitigating factors they cited?
There were four main ones. First, they noted that Lynn showed genuine remorse in court and asked her family for forgiveness.
Okay, that's standard.
Right. Second, and this is the big one, was that overwhelming, unanimous plea for leniency from both sides of the family. The court treated that as a major factor.
So the family's consensus was almost like a formal recommendation to the court.
In a way, yes. Third, the court explicitly mentioned the spirit of humanity and clemency in Vietnamese Lot Tin Hun Dao Va Quan Hun, which gave them the philosophical room to prioritize mercy.
And the last one.
The last one was about Lynn herself. She was noted as being a generally mild-mannered, diligent student with no prior trouble. She wasn't a danger to society at large. So you add all that up, and they decided that while a severe punishment was needed, the ultimate one was not.
This whole deep dive, it just shows that legal systems aren't just, machines that apply rules. They're human institutions that sometimes have to try and reconcile the letter of the law with profound human context.
They are. And this case shows a court willing to say that the strict pursuit of justice for one person would have caused another unacceptable loss for the rest of the family, who were also victims. They balanced accountability with clemency.
So what this really means for you, the listener, is that the family's choice to forgive was a deliberate act. They sacrificed a purely punitive outcome to stop another tragedy from unfolding. This case just blows up the simple labels of victim and perpetrator.
Lynn was clearly both.
The long-term victim became the short-term aggressor.
Which leaves us with a really important final question. If a court officially finds that the spiritual trauma caused by a victim was a direct catalyst for a crime, how does a society effectively step in earlier? How do you break that cycle of violence before the long-term victim feels like their only way out is to become an aggressor?